today's World Insight with Tian Wei. Elon Musk confirms he wants to privatize Tesla. What roadblocks lay ahead of Tesla's decision? And a talk with UNICEF Executive Director Henrietta Fore about the plight of children in war-torn areas.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. We begin our program today with the latest on Tesla going private. Tesla Chief Executive Elon Musk is in talks with different investors to add credibility to his plan of privatizing the U.S. electric car maker. But till now, no one has publicly declared their support. Musk announced his bombshell plan last week on Twitter, which triggered investor lawsuits as well as an investigation by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Why has the tech visionary made this decision, and can it be fulfilled? Before we get down to the discussion, let's take a look at this background.
A safe, self-driving future for the California-based electric car maker. Tesla CEO and founder Elon Musk tweeted on Monday that he was working with buyout firm Silver Lake and investment bank Goldman Sachs as financial advisors on his plan to take the U.S. electric car maker private. Musk also said the manager of Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund had voiced support for his plan several times. The most recent time was 2 weeks ago when they took a nearly 5% stake in Tesla. Musk also talked with different investors in recent days, but no one has stepped forward publicly as being involved in the possible privatization. The CEO, who owns nearly 20% of Tesla, first announced he is considering taking the company private through Twitter last Tuesday. Going private is a move that Musk views as allowing the company to focus on long-term objectives rather than be subject to the distractions of the stock market. Also, as a privately held company, it can keep competitive information secret and shield the company from Wall Street's demand for positive quarterly results. But Musk's tweet soon caused the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to ask Tesla why the matter was not disclosed in a regulatory filing and whether it believed investor protection rules had been met. And then on last Wednesday, Tesla admitted that it was evaluating the privatization and that relevant discussions had been addressed by directors. Musk said he held space transportation company SpaceX as a model, saying he wanted existing Tesla investors to continue to hold stock through a special purposed fund. However, there is skepticism over its feasibility, as well as investor lawsuits claiming securities fraud.
For more discussion on Tesla going private, we are joined in Beijing by Jay Huang, founding partner of J-Stone Capital and former managing director of Intel China. In Denver, the United States, Mr. Levi Tillerman, who is the author of The Great Race, The Global Quest for the Car of the Future. And in New York, also U.S., we have Mr. Ari Zoldan, who is the chairman of Quantum Media Group. I want to welcome the three of you gentlemen for being with us on this very interesting story developing day by day. What is your understanding of the decision or apparent decision made by Elon Musk to let his company go private? Shall we go to Mr. Huang first?
Yes, I think people has multiple reasons and to wondering whether he has a motivation, to manipulate the stock price. First of all, he has a motivation. I think everybody knows, Tesla is one of the most shorted stocks in the market. So there is lots of negative information about Tesla. So he was quite frustrated. So if he could raise the stock price to squeeze the short seller, that's good for him. Secondly, I think his plan has a lot of holes. It's not very solid. For example, his plan is to privatize at $420 some, and he hopes a lot of current investors will not sell at that price, will go with him to go along with the privatization.
Right.
However, if you're the investor, the future buyer, today you can buy the company at the price of $350. Why not buy today and wait and later on to buy at $420,
right.
which is lots of premium. And also for the current investor, and I don't know why they want to go not selling at $420 to go along with him.
Whether the plan has many holes is one question, but the question really is, what do you think are the reasons behind this apparent decision he is making? Let's go to Mr. Tilleman.
Well, Elon Musk has big ideas and big dreams, and he thinks in the long term. As a result of that, frequently he makes these goals that are slightly overambitious, and so he comes in beyond the timeline that he had planned to, and he comes in over budget. Now that said, the technologies that Elon Musk is promoting and that he is putting out there are transformative, and so that doesn't mean that they're not worth it. Elon Musk doesn't like the way that Wall Street thinks about these things, which is on a short-term, quarterly basis. He wants the ability to be able to think in the long term, and that means to invest in the long term.
Mr. Zhou, then do you buy that this decision is mainly about the long term rather than the short term?
I think so, but I think the bigger issue is, or the bigger challenge is, and maybe I'm taking more of a holistic approach, but Elon's he's an innovator, he's a pioneer, he's a technologist, he's a true entrepreneur. And what's happening in Wall Street right now, especially when you're running a public company, there's just a lot of noise, and it affects the culture, and it also affects the long-term mission of building a really incredible, innovative company. So when you're dealing with shareholders, you're dealing with board of directors, it's a lot of noise out there, and if he can figure out how to streamline that noise and focus on innovation, I think there's a much better outcome for everyone.
But Mr. Zhou, can I remind you that Wall Street has never been quiet before? I mean, why, when the company went public, at that time he doesn't care that much about so-called noise, but now it's too much of an issue for him. If you look at the timeline Elon Musk has designed for his company when it comes to innovation, you see many of those deadlines have been missed, in fact. Many of the technologies promised to the investors actually have not been fulfilled when it comes to the implementation and also the discovery of technology. So, Mr. Zhou, then, is this too convenient a choice for Mr. Musk to walk away from his early promises and so-called plan?
Sure. Well, again, just because Wall Street worked then, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's working now and it's working long term. So I think there's that issue. And the second, I guess I don't think he was expecting so much noise and so much pushback and spending a majority of his time managing a public company and not innovating. So I think those are the core issues, and I think if he can overcome that, even if he does go public at the 420 mark, I think really it's going to benefit everyone in the long run.
Mr. Tilleman, though, do you see that as a trend among some of the most well-known tech companies that are experimenting with new ideas, apparently trying to set a trend for the future? Are we going to see many more companies like Tesla who try to go from public to private?
I think that's right. I think it is a trend to some extent. We've heard leaders of Wall Street like Jamie Dimon and Warren Buffett comment on the fact that quarterly earnings are really not the best way to gauge the progress of a company, and they're not the best way to lead investments. Now, there's another issue that I think we need to point to, which is Elon Musk has become very weary of social media. Social media has turned into a toxic fire hose that just blasts entrepreneurs and people who are trying to experiment with new ideas, and it wears you down. It wears you down, and Elon Musk is tired of having to combat that toxic fire hose, and that, I think, is another reason why he's decided that he'd like to take the company private.
Well, Mr. Tilleman, if I could remind you of the fact that Mr. Musk exactly put out the message about he's trying to make his company private on social media through Twitter. That's why he also run into a lot of problems, legal problems as a result. So are you saying these tech giants or entrepreneurs are so fragile that, well, when social media works for them, they will take the full advantage of it. When it is not, when there are different voices on the social media, they try to say, oh, this is the social media destroying us, the future of technology. Mr. Tillerman.
When you look back at history, at the companies that were real innovators within the economy, and groups like Bell Labs, they had a lot of freedom to experiment and freedom to innovate behind closed doors. And my guess is that Elon Musk is trying to pursue that same kind of environment for Tesla going forward.
Well, Mr. Huang, I have to ask you that question. Just followed Mr. Tillerman's answer. You know, he has the choice. I mean, Mr. Musk has the choice of make sure it could be an in-house innovation process. He could do that, but he rather chooses to make it public because to attract investment, possibly, to attract spotlight, possibly, for different kinds of reasons. But he actually has the choice of making things public or not necessarily only within the house when it comes to the innovation process, or at least part of the innovation process. Mr. Huang.
I think the electronic car industry landscape has changed. I think the current investor for Tesla, I don't believe they're short-term investors to begin with. They have been, and they believe in Tesla for a long, long time ago. I think now we're seeing is that the whole landscape has changed. The overall automobile industry, I think with the automatic driving cars in the market, the total number of cars will shrink. So the total market size will reduce. However, players are coming more. The traditional car makers are coming to this side with the electronic cars, and also internet companies also coming to this market, and also there's a lot of independent, the new car makers like Tesla coming on board. So we see more competition and a shrinking market size for the long run. So the long-term perspectives also changed. So that's one of the reasons. And then I think and the Teslas and the stock price has been quite and up and down. And this is not just say Wall Street looking to short-term perspective. This is because, in my opinion, the long-term perspective also changed quite dramatically.
Mr. Zodeng, one of the reasons we talk about Tesla and also Mr. Elon Musk is not just for its own sake, but rather to look at companies of the same kind or similar kind, whether there's a trend and what does that trend mean. So, Mr. Zodeng, let me come back to you about that question. Do you see that there's likely to be more companies following what Tesla is doing, given what Mr. Huang earlier suggested? Actually, the market is not necessarily expanding, but rather much more competition in the field.
Sure. Well, in terms of the Chinese market, we all know the middle class is upward of 300 million. And couple that with the upper class, it's probably another 25% more. Mercedes, Audi, they've all broken into that market, producing about 2 to 3 million cars per year. So Tesla obviously is looking to get a fraction of that. If they get 1% out of the 300 million, there's 3 million cars right there. And Tesla obviously has built an incredible job in terms of building their brand. Obviously, the Chinese are very or recently attracted to brands similar to the Americans. So I do think the combination of Tesla going private and obviously that minimizes some of the noise in the market, coupled with them cracking into the Chinese market, I think it's a no-brainer and a win-win.
You talk about the market, very important. We would like our audience, rather our other panelists, to also comment about that. Not only the market, but also the investors. If you look at it, it's a Saudi fund, and also a Chinese company called Tencent, actually, that has been holding quite some numbers of shares of Tesla. You see that's a very interesting picture, particularly given the geopolitical changes and also the changes of the energy industry in the future. Mr. Huang, your comment here?
I agree, and China's market is very important for Tesla, as actually could be a very promising market. For example, the Tesla Model 3, they sell at around $70,000 in the United States, but in China currently they sell almost twice as much. So that says that with Tesla going to build a factory in Shanghai, assuming they can lower that price tag and as close as to the United States, we can expect Tesla is going to sell a lot more cars in China. So no doubt about that. So China market is crucial for Tesla.
Right. And Mr. Tillemann, if China's market is so crucial for Tesla, it is really a reminder of what Mr. Musk said when he was in China trying to build up that factory. He said, I'm not going to have any American money. I'm going to have the Chinese money here to invest in this company. Your thought about the investors, where they come from, Saudi Arabia, China, for example, and also the future market of Tesla and companies alike, how should we understand the logic here?
Well, both of those companies are really interesting examples. For the Saudis, this is obviously a hedge against future oil dependency and oil prices, and it points towards Tesla's broader market strategy. This isn't just an electric vehicle company. This is a mobility company. This is a company that is into energy production with their Solar City arm, into battery storage, into so many of the critical industries of the 21st century. And so for the Saudis, this is a perfect hedge. Now, Tencent is an interesting story because they actually hacked a Tesla Model S a number of years ago. And so they understand Tesla's technology from the inside out. And when they achieved that hack, it was considered kind of a slap in the face to Tesla. But they liked the technology enough that they decided to go in on Tesla and to invest in Tesla. And so I think that's really a good omen for the company going forward. Those are the kinds of technology and industry actors that you need to have a good strategic roadmap going forward.
Mr. Huang, when Mr. Tillemann talked about Tesla, one could really remember that another case study going on in China, which is a company called NIO. Also, the founder tried to paint a picture for the investors, but so far the income or the revenue of that company is really quite small, and yet it is trying to go public in New York rather than Tesla trying to go private. So how should we see this trend? Some say it is pretty much a China fighter of Tesla in the Chinese market. So how do you see this very interesting directional changes going on?
Okay. Maybe first let me comment on Tencent and investment into Tesla.
Oh, by the way, Tencent invested in both of these companies.
Exactly. so I think that for Tencent, it's also a hedge. And then they invest into electronic cars, multiple of them, instead of doing it by themselves. So I think that's a good move. It's a good hedge for Tencent. Going back to these two car makers, it's very interesting. They seem to, move towards the opposite directions, as all depending on where they can get money. I think if you cannot get money, raise the money privately, you want to go to public. On the other hand, and if you think in the public domain, public traded company, you have lots of pressure or scrutinized, you want to go private. Whether they can succeed it, it's a different story. We'll wait to see, which one can be successful, marching towards the opposite directions.
Probably we have to wait and see. If you think about Elon Musk's decision, actually, he signaled his wish to privatize the electric vehicle maker before. In fact, last year already, in 2017, he said this, it actually makes us less efficient to be a public company. He listed other reservations about Tesla becoming a public company. For example, the stock market volatility we talk about gives a lot of noises to decision-making in Tesla's management. Also, shareholders often pursue short-term gain, and that hampers some decisions that aim for long-term gains. As a privately held company, Tesla now makes quarterly disclosures about debt levels, personal changes, executive compensation, production delivery, and many other things. So, but having said that, though, Mr. Zoldan, the question is, why do we see companies very similar in nature or very similar in the potential they're trying to paint for investors, are actually going very different direction, going private, going public?
Well, sure. I mean, you know, another thing that people aren't talking about, and you're hearing the prediction here first, I'm willing to bet that Tesla may be looking also, we talk about, you know, unconventional strategies from going public to going private. I bet in the back of his mind, and obviously there's restrictions specifically in China, but going towards possibly an ICO, an initial coin offering, and figuring out how to pull in some of the millennials also and to try to mix things up. And I'm willing to bet in the back of his mind there's some conversation going on there as well. But, you know, are we actually going to see a trend from public to private to some sort of crowdfunding? I wouldn't be surprised if that happens.
Mr. Tillemann, your thought here, particularly, it's not just how it's being funded, but who are the players in coming up with those funding, and what are the markets that it is looking at. These issues are all working together. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and I think companies have different needs at different times, and Elon Musk brought Tesla public for a specific set of reasons, and now having been a public company for a number of years and having seen just extraordinary maturation in their supply chain and in their ability to produce product and in their reputation internationally, he's thinking that he might appreciate some of the benefits of going private again. And that makes sense. The situation that companies face changes, and the perspective of founders also changes, and CEOs change. We see this all the time, and quite frankly, I think that Musk probably has good reasons for making this move right now.
Mr. Huang, final words from you, very briefly, sir.
If we listen to what Elon Musk has complained about issues he currently facing, none of those issues are new to him. Before he went to IPO, he should have known all those issues. I think it's a matter about, you know, at that time, he needed money, go to the, you know, public, and then he went into the issue, you want to, you know, go to private. Whatever way is suited for him. I think that's my interpretation.
Right. Of course, none of us could really read his mind. He is making his own decision. The reason we're talking about it is it's going to be a very interesting case study about how high-tech companies are looking at their future at this moment. For now, thank you so much for the three of you for being with us, Mr. Huang, Mr. Tillemann, and Mr. Zoldan. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program, I spoke with the Executive Director of UNICEF, Henrietta Fore, about the struggles in saving children from war zones right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, the program coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. This week, we bring you our special series of interviews, Women on Top. The first is Henrietta Fore, the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, who's also the UNICEF Executive Director. UNICEF is working to provide urgent assistance to children affected by violence in Syria, including millions of children, refugees driven out of their country. Who better to ask about these efforts than Henrietta Fore? She just took office as UNICEF chief this year. For more than 4 decades, she has championed economic development, education, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief in both public service and the private sector. Take a look. The wars that is going on around the world, may I say particularly in Syria, the fate of the children there focus of the world attention. What can UNICEF do? Can you really save lives? Can you really help those people out of the devastating situation?
Chen Wei, yes, we can. So UNICEF can be there before, during, and after those emergencies.
Are you there?
Yes, we are. So in this particular case, in Syria, we have people in Syria. As you know, the violence, the displacement is in so many parts of Syria. So having staff in each town with internally displaced people centers, so getting them water, blankets, food, health supplies, hygiene kits. It's so basic, and yet if you have to leave and run away from your home, what you need is, you need to be clean, you need to have water,
right.
You need your family. We also try to make sure that you're connected to your family. So sometimes families get split up in times of violence. So they are running, especially young children, in different directions. So we try to give them name bands so that we don't lose them, so that we know where they're from. Sometimes in the trauma, they can forget what village they're from, their own name, the name of their parents, and yet we don't want them to lose their identity and their families. So we help with that. We also help when they cross the border. So when they're refugees out of Syria, they go into Lebanon or Jordan or Turkey or Iraq, we help with making sure that there are schools. So that, let's say, the Lebanese school system, they now are running a shift for Lebanese children and a shift for Syrian children. So the teachers work extra, but we are trying to get them into a school system so that they can learn how to read and to write. Because with the violence going on for 5 years, a young child can miss learning how to read and write. And if that happens in a number of places around the world, it's true in South Sudan, it's true in many of the places, your concern is the concern that we feel, the urgency that we feel.
But ED4, as you may know, many of these children, they do not have necessarily a family connection, which means these children have to act alone. And therefore, many of the supplies that you're talking about, many of the opportunities that you're talking about, these children might not have enough strength to grab them.
Yes.
So how to make sure that those children are having the real opportunity and equal opportunity with those children that are having families?
Yes, 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 you're exactly right. And so that's part of the puzzle of working with children. Children have to feel safe.
Yes.
They have to feel protected.
They're the weakest party.
Yes, they are, and they're the most affected by all of this violence. So if we can create child-friendly places and places of rest where they can just pause in terms of everything around them falling apart, that helps. And then if we can get protection services, because as you know, if you're a young person, you're alone, you're very vulnerable.
Yes.
You're vulnerable to groups that might want to grab you for their
whatever
militia,
reason, yes,
or for other purposes, trafficking in young people. So having safe places for children is very much part of our duty and our responsibility worldwide.
But besides that, what else can UNICEF do? Can you call on governments from around the world, ask them to look at their own plans, look at how they're dealing with Syria, to ask both sides in Syria about their plans for the future of the country, look at what they're doing to the children on the ground. Can you do that as well?
Yes. So Tianwei, just as you use your voice to speak out on behalf of all of us, so UNICEF uses its voice worldwide for children.
What is the latest try about Syria, for example?
So we are asking that there be no more violence, that there be access, humanitarian access into every community. Every single individual, particularly the children, should have the ability to have food, to have water, to have hygiene, and to have a chance at an education.
But are you being listened?
One's never listened to enough. We do not have enough access. There is not enough sense by the world community of responsibility for these many young lives. But we talk with governments all over the world. We work in 190 countries. Some governments, at some times in their electoral cycle, feel very strongly about the role of women and children, and they take it to heart. They create excellent primary school systems, excellent early childhood development systems, newborn survival, secondary education. Right. At other times, governments do not listen to us, but that's when you need the people to say, children are the most important opportunity we have. Let's look after them primary.
The world is changing so fast. There seems to be potential conflicts among countries that we have not witnessed before. So what does it mean for your role here, whether it is about the Middle East, whether it is about Africa, whether it is about the relationship between your major donors or the changes of landscape among your donors? What does that mean to you?
So there's an increased emphasis on children, and we hope that...
Hope it's not lip service.
I hope it's not lip service either. So we hope that we can convince a number of countries to really focus their foreign assistance on children. And if we can, I think we can make some great strides in the years ahead. But we're not going to do it alone. So it will be done with governments, it will be done with businesses, it will be done with the civil society at large, it will be done with the media. Those images on the beach of a child are what drive the world to make a change. We start saying, not here, no more, we should not let this exist. So come with us around the world, show the world, open up to what's happening. The needs are immense. Children are either a great liability, a ticking time bomb for the world, or they are the world's greatest opportunity. We see it as an opportunity. So if we can all back that, it will make a difference.
We have this massive debate in the world over the past 2 to 3 years about whether international system after World War II, whether international mechanisms such as the UN, UNICEF included, is still going to work. Are they still relevant? Should they still be the backbone of an international governance system?
So the United Nations system is a remarkable creation, and it did come out of wartime when there was an emergency need. And sometimes what that leads to is that people begin to lose interest because there's no longer an emergency at hand. And yet,
or they don't realize there is an emergency at hand.
Yes. And so we have 300 emergencies a year now. It is extremely important for the world to not lose hope, to not lose confidence. So when I see an organization like UNICEF that is capable, on the ground, can respond in times of crises and in times of just hope, then I would grab it. I would use it. I would try to make sure that every child in the world has nutrition, has education, has health care, sanitation, water, and protection. So why not use it? It's here. It's available.
Talking about China and UNICEF, you see, Fore, that China's role has been changing. Of course, it used to be the least developing economy, and now it is becoming quite an emerging economy. So how China is going to work with the UN system, and also how China is going to work specifically with UNICEF.
I think, Chan Wei, there's lots of chance here. So if China would pair with us to bring children at the heart of all development along the Belt Road, I think it would change not only how the projects are accepted by communities, but also how the experiences of China and the international world intersect. So, for example, if you're putting in a road Along that road, you would want a school, you'd want a health clinic, you'd like to work with the community, you'd like to work with the young people so that they can maintain that road. So there are many possibilities for employment and activities. We also want to think about what are the skills for the future. So this group of young people, we are inviting on behalf of the United Nations and the Secretary General, China to join for a young people's agenda. And if so, what are the life skills that you'll need as a young person? So if you're between the ages of 10 and 18, what are you learning that you're going to need for the future? And I think that will be an important area of activity. China has so many interesting models and examples to share with the world that we would like to be partners.
About the Belt and Road that you mentioned, it is still a plan, and it's a plan that China plays a leading role in coming to the design, but also it is inviting all the partnerships along the Belt and Road Initiative. How will that eventually come to be realized, and to what degree, eventually about what, is still a very open discussion. So, Edie, Fore, in this regard, how will the children's cause be integrated into the overall plan?
Yes, good. So, Tianwei, you're on to the most important operational point. So, UNICEF's strength is our people and our programs on the ground. We've been around for 70 years. So, all along the Belt Road, in every one of those countries, we will have people and programs that have been there for years. So, just as we do in China, working with Education Ministry or Health Ministry, working with local and regional governments, we are in each of those countries. So as the Belt Road Initiative moves into each country, we are already there on the ground to be the liaison with the local government, to shape the programs, because much of it is related to having ownership at the country level for, let's say, their early childhood development, their own primary school education, their national development plan. So UNICEF helps to shape that with a partner on the ground. We work with each of the ministries. We work with the local communities so that there is a sense of understanding about best practices, but there's also a commitment that parents have with children, that regional governments and national governments have with their citizens. And that becomes the strength of the network for Belt and Road.
But at the same time, Edie, Fore, you may be very well aware that the Belt and Road Initiative, after China has put forward this proposal, there are a lot of debates going on in the world. More than 80 of them, countries and organizations, have been supporting of this initiative, and they want to actively play a role. Others are still pondering. There's different opinions, too, from other countries. So how do you, as UNICEF, which is an international organization, it is within the UN system, work with this idea and work with this proposal and develop it?
So we feel that children are central. So children cannot wait. This is the time to act. And so as a result, we are impartial. We work with everyone.
Those rhetorical debates does not help with the fate of the children, does it?
No, it does not. And at least for us, we are the neutral, safe, impartial, knowledgeable partner. So we work with everyone. So if a country is interested in their children, we're there to help.
As simple as that.
Yes.
Exactly. But on the other hand, Edie, Fore, China is still fighting with its own problems. Some of them are gigantic problems in its own sake. For example, poverty alleviation. China has been planning to eliminate extreme poverty in 3 years' time. That's going to be a daunting task if you know the exact number. So how do you think UNICEF can work with China on those important causes? Once China's problem is being solved, it is a big contribution to the world solving an ultimate question.
Yes, exactly. So let us say that the 32 to 34 million individuals in China who are below the poverty line, how do we reach them? We have a number of programs that we're doing jointly in China with a number of ministries, Ministry of Health, with MOFCOM, etc. The problem of stopping poverty into the next generation, because if you can alleviate poverty in one generation, particularly among women, they will pass on good practices, then the children of that generation will be healthier, they will be better educated. So there are many benefits to eradicating poverty, and the lessons of China are extremely important. That we would work both in the western areas of China, which are many of the most vulnerable populations and the hardest to reach, to try to help those numbers. Because when China reaches its important goals, then the world, under the Sustainable Development Goals, will have a chance to reach its Sustainable Development Goals.
Well, that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.